Thank you for your kind word, Elisa. And good morning to all of you. I'm so surprised that so many came so early here, so that it's the place. My presentation, the topic of my presentation comes out of a sensation that the distance between this humanistic way of introducing services and as a mainstream psychiatric services has become longer during the last 30 years. In the beginning of 90s, there was a lot of competition and debate and about the different ideas how to work in psychiatry between different schools of psychotherapy and so on. But nowadays, no more. For instance, when people hear about the outcomes that has been done in open dialogue, someone say that I don't believe it, and it is. Because it's out of the imagination that you can think when you are in this pathology-orientated, symptom-orientated services. And during the pandemic, I took time, I started to think that I need to do with this, and it ended up in writing a book about a kind of trying to find a summary. What is it included in the idea that we have received in the developing open dialogue that really make that big difference in respect of the traditional way of working. And the title of the book became Dialogue Does Cure. Why? There is one provocative word, and this is the cure. And people say that you cannot use it because it's a medical term, but actually I do it. I do it voluntary because I really need to want to focus on the idea that psychiatric care, traditional psychiatric care, does not cure. Really, we have a lot of evidence. I will show you some. But then when you come in the way that meeting humans and not with their symptoms, things start to happen in a good way. Starting of showing a piece of studies that we have done in psychotic crisis in Western Lapland. We have 3 research periods in which we followed up 2 years' time. What happened if you have first time in your life psychotic experiences? The first one was 92 to 93. It was a part of a national Finnish multi-center study in which one of the questions was that what is the role of neuroleptic medication in treatment of psychosis? And for that reason, it was created a new procedure not to start the medication in the beginning, but only in the case if the powerful psychosocial intervention does not help enough. So we could wait 3, 4, 5, 6 weeks before going into the medication. And what we found out, Western Lapland was one of the 3 sites which followed this, and this was compared to a more traditional way of working. And we found out that use of neuroleptics, 26%. Only 1/4 of the people needed neuroleptic medication. Actually, in the very beginning, it was 15%. Very few actually need neuroleptic medication if you have an interest to meet with the family and all over. And outcomes already at that time were pretty good. 74% could return to full employment and job seeking. We knew that this is totally different compared to traditional psychiatric care in which there was report that more than 60% of the people with psychosis are retired after 2 years. We decided to go on our own project that is called the Open Dialogue in a Group Psychosis 2, 94 to 97. And the phenomenon were about the same. 1/4 needed medication, and even 9 of 10 could return to full employment. You could almost say that all could return to full employment and return back to their social life. It's very exceptional. Because of a lot of critics of this, and because of other reasons, there was also a replication 10 years after. And again, we found that those outcomes are pretty much the same. Then 5 or 6 years ago, there was published a paper, a kind of long-term follow-up of 90 years follow-up, looking at the register-based information in Finland. What has happened with these people who came into the care of open dialogue about 20 years ago 108 altogether in these 3 research groups, and made a comparison to the rest of Finland based on registration about the people who came into the treatment 95 to 96. And we can see some differences. First of all, there seem to be differences in respect of mortality, that it would be lower in Western Lapland compared to the rest of Finland, but actually it is not the case. But it's very interesting to realize that when this open dialogue type of care has been functioning some year, what has happened is that people take contact to the system much earlier, so that the mean age of the people who come into the contact is about 5 years less than in the rest of Finland. And if we control the age, there is no significant difference in the mortality. But there is a difference how much people are hospitalized in the treatment as usual. The TAU refer to this concept. There are 94%, almost all are hospitalized more than 1 month, compared to 18% of those who got the open dialogue care in the very beginning of the crisis. Ongoing contact is 49% compared to 28% of the people who came into the care of open dialogue. Using neuroleptics continues in 81% of cases compared to 36%. And the most dramatic statistics below, saying that in the treatment as usual, 61% of people are living on retirement compared to the open dialogue care, that was 33%. This is even more powerful in the way, because this is not a follow-up study in the way, there was no control of the treatment after 2 first years. We know, for instance, that 40% of the people have moved from Western Lapland, other parts of Finland, and in new crises they meet with traditional services. But it's a bit amazing to think that something that happens in my life 90 years ago, 20 years ago, when I got a difficult time, still affect the way that I live new crises if I need for some help. For instance, in the way that even if they would meet a psychiatrist who thinks in a very traditional way, they are not proposed medication in the same way as the ones who were there. The outcomes of open dialogue could be better, so it's all the time to think how you would do better. But the outcomes in the treatments as usual are terrible. Think about it. If you got psychotic problems at the moment, you could prognose that 20 years after, half of us still are in treatment, and 80% on medication with all the secondary side effects that medication causes, and so on. And actually, we know that this is the case on the whole. 10 years ago, there was published a paper in Schizophrenia Bulletin, one of the most valued publications in psychiatry, that showed that the outcome, the recovery rates of schizophrenia has become all the time worse. When it's focused, it was best 18% for between 92 to 55, and then step by step coming down, so that after 96, only 6% had a recovery rate. Around 55 happened that there was introduced this medication, first neuroleptic medication, and after that the things started to become worse. 1980, it was introduced this illness model. It is the diagnostic category DSM-3 that introduced that now we should think all of these as illnesses, and they started to emerge this huge extreme movement of looking at brain, that they are brain illnesses, and after that things really have become worse, so that we are actually living in a period of time in which there is a lot of evidence about this, that in the treatment as usual things become worse, and of course in the more humanistic way of thinking that things can become better. And that was my attempt to try to find an answer. And I have 7 answers to that. I will introduce some of them in more precise. And the idea is that it's not a kind of list that this and this happens. There are many different kind of ideas, but trying to grasp that you really need to think about the entire system in which you are working. This is too small to be read, but it's. By the way, the book already is published in some languages. In addition to Finnish, it's published in Danish, Spanish, Italian. It's on the way to be published in English also. It already seems to be in the list of Amazon and so on, so that it's available. Recommended reading when you have it. So. First of all, what happens in the dialogical practice is that it creates a new view of human life, new human view. As such, it's not new view of human, but it's very different compared to the symptom-oriented idea that is put into work in the traditional psychiatry. And actually what happens in the traditional psychiatry is that there is no human view. And this is the huge problem, which makes possibility to put the people in need for help as a victim of power that is used. It is thought that it's only the symptoms that define the people. But thinking of the dialogical point of view means that the best mental health care is to accept the full human beings with their emotional experiences and not to aim at eliminating symptoms or making change in the family. Mihail Bachtin says that in a very lovely and beautiful way when he says that to live means to participate in dialogue, to ask questions, to hear, to respond, to agree, and so forth. In this dialogue, a person participates wholly and throughout his whole life, with his eyes, lips, hands, soul, spirit, with his whole body and deeds. And he says here two very important things. First of all, that we participate in dialogue from the very first inhaling that we come into the world. And this is shown by the modern intersubjectivity research that babies have an innate, let's say, biological capacity to be in dialogue. Isn't that amazing? That there are two things, a kind of prerequisite of life. When I come to world, I need to learn to breathe. And if I do not do that, I will die. And as essential is the idea that when I come to world, I need to learn to be in dialogue. And if I'm not in dialogue, I will die. Mihail Bachtin says that outside dialogue is death. And it's so simple. It's so simple that we do not realize that it's so simple. And of course, when we think about the meetings in which we are, we have a good feeling. I think that something very basic idea of human life is taking place there. There's a kind of a touch of the basic ideas of being human. And it's also a kind of a message to us that when we are so let's say intrigued with the idea that we learn different kind of intervention in different kind of settings, but actually the most important things already has happened when we start to use of our intervention. Nothing to say that we cannot use our intervention, but all the time think that it is the relationships that we create in which people become hurt that is the thing that makes different, that makes the big different. And the second thing that Mihail Bachtin says that dialogue is not only speaking. For me, 30 years ago, when I in a way found out the idea, Bachtin's idea of dialogism to help us to understand the experiences that we had these open therapy meetings that we had started to organize. It was a speaking and thinking that we come together and speak and follow the different ideas. Of course, what we need to do. But Bachtin says here that we participate in dialogue with our entire bodies and everything that we do. And of course, nowadays, I think that this is the 90% is else than speaking. Even if we are so occupied of speaking, even if speaking is important, nothing to say, but understanding the other part is so important. Bachtin also defines what is this dialogue all about. He said that dialogue, here is not the threshold to action, it's the action itself. It's not a means for revealing, for bringing to the surface the already made character of a person. No, in dialogue, a person not only shows himself outward, but he becomes for the first time that which he is, and we repeat, not only for others, but for himself. So actually in dialogue we speak to ourselves. One of the very first time I started to become curious about this issue was that we met in one outpatient clinic with one lady, 20 years of age. One nurse in the clinic invited, could I be with her to meet with her? And she told a history that a year before, her parents had separated. She thought that my parents can do whatever they want, I'm grown up, it won't affect my life. But she started to have different kind of somatic complaints went to one doctor or another, but no illnesses were found. And in the end, it became a kind of pre-psychotic preoccupation of her health, and one doctor referred to the outpatient clinic. And when she tells this, all of a sudden she said that, but it was actually sad when father moved apart. Without knowing to say anything, I only repeated what she said. You said, it is sad that when father moved apart. And then there is a small silence. She said, yes. And I asked, could you say some more about it? And actually, step by step, started to realize that this is perhaps the most important thing, that what happens in the dialogue. There is someone who hears her words, what he's saying. And for me, actually, it's very important to repeat word by word, no paraphrasing, but word by word. And she can hear herself. Oh, that's what I said to myself. A Russian psychologist, Lev Vygotsky, says that we understand what we know what we think when we speak, when we usually think the opposite. And of course, Harleen and Harry Coolidge are also very much in the same idea that while speaking, we learn to know what do we think and not the opposite. Being and this situation in which Pahtin said that what is it all about is to be listened to, respected, to heard. And for a human being, there is nothing more terrible than a lack of response, he's saying. And of course, all the practices, the humanistic practices, are aimed to listen and respond to people. And my claim is that in the treatment as usual setting, the idea is not to respond, but it's the opposite. It's to try to teach the people that you need to learn to behave in this way for get help. And of course, if you are in a crisis, that's devastating. Second part of the answer why this dialogical practice has proved to be tan effective is that, of course, this new human view is very strongly related with the intersubjectivity idea. Colvin Trevarsen and others who have been working in this, looking at the communication and find out that babies attune to the parents in a very rhythmic, embodied way. As he says, in a judge-like way, like a music, he says that life is not psychology, life is music. And in this rhythmic attunement, we create reality, we create the human mind. And what happens in this way of understanding is that the baby becomes an author of her own growth. It's no longer an idea that we Hippocratic parents think that, okay, we raise up our children, but they have shown in their studies, for instance, that the babies make more initiatives than the adults make. So perhaps we can think a bit different. It's the babies that make the parents. Or, okay, I can accept that we do it together, but still, that they have much more active role than we ever think. And of course, in a very same way, when we are in a situation for giving services for people, they are co-authors the services, and of course this openness is one way to do it, and dialogue another way to include the voices of them in these processes. And all the time think that also in a crisis, we met with full human being in which they are very strongly affecting every step that we take instead of thinking that we need to have the control of what happens. Actually, it is the idea that we move the case from the patient to ourselves. It's no longer the symptoms, the problems, the pathology, but what does it mean to us, to ourselves? And how do we react, how do we respond? And if we do it in a right way, we can create a kind of new idea. One of the very first person in finding out this was the idea of being connected in a rhythmic way. Philosopher Maxine Johnston, who said that movement is the first language. Movement is the language in which we learn to regulate our affective arousal. When babies start to cry, make movements. It's her attempt to regulate the affective arousal. Something bad happens here or here. And what happens at that moment, mom and dad come and take care of her. And this is so important moment in human life because this is the end of individuality. Other becomes part of my affect regulation. Other is part of me. And if we think of this idea of psychotherapy on the whole, we have been thinking that we speak of emotions. The idea of psychotherapeutic idea is that the client and the therapist together speak about their emotional experiences, give meaning in different ways, in different methods. For example, psychoanalytic therapy may give transference interpretation that this is so. This anxiety tells us that it's a sign of your relationship that you had with your mother because this reminds of that and happened. And different way in systemic family therapy, you make positive connotations and make the people are together and so on. And then if we think that the other end of this language is the language of movement. For a dialogical practice, the most important issue is here in between. When we have some sensing in my body, I'm speaking of something and then all of us sudden I start to hesitate, I don't find words, and perhaps I have tears in my eyes. And this is the most important moment, because in this moment I'm connected with some memory of my body, with some issues that I did not have words. As this young lady, actually it was a bit sad when father moved apart, for the first time that he said. And we need to be awake at that moment, because this opens the door, the window of the issues that did not yet have words. And of course the idea of the dialogical practice is to have words being connected with our embodied experiences. By the way, speaking of emotions is a kind of rational idea. We speak of thoughts, but when we are in the world of sensing, we are in the world of our body sensing without this rationality that need to be there. Nothing wrong with rationality, but all the time think that the way to the most important experiences are through our bodily sensing. And of course, thinking of, many of us are very fond of narrative ideas of the idea, but there is a bit difference here, because the most important things do not have narratives. It's not the idea that listen to the different narratives, but listen to the things that do not yet have narratives. And this is my claim, that in the dialogical practice we have managed to take use of this knowledge in a pretty optimal way. One actually psychoanalyst, Daniel Stern, used a very strong formulation about the same issue when he said that this is a revolution, because now we think that the human mind is created through interaction with other minds. It's not something that burns from inside. The third point of the issue, how come the dialogue cures, is the idea to think open dialogue as a family therapeutic practice. It's not a family therapy because it's all the time integrated with the system of care, but of course the basis is to work with families, with social networks. And the big shift that has happened when we started our work, we had a strong impact of the systemic view of family, systemic analysis of family, thinking of what functions does the symptom, for instance, psychotic symptom, have for the family system. And it was the way to start to make intervention, to make change in the family. And after that, there happened this linguistic turn that started to say that it's not a question that there are one system that we need to find out, but we need to find out about the different narratives, experiences, or as Harleen and Harry Kuuslian in such a lovely way said, that it's not the systems that make problems, it's the problems that make systems. The way that we speak becomes important. And then the third turn, this affected or corporeal turn, as Maxine D. Johnson said, is going further from the spoken narratives into a place for the bodily sensing, unique bodily sensing that we have, and include this as a part of the practice. And all these families are no longer targets or objects of the interventions, but really become an ally that we never can compensate in any way.
May I ask something?
Please, if you ask right things. So.
You have new languages created.
Yes.
How important you see is the new language, or is it sharing the emotions, or creating new language, or how do you?
I think that what you probably heard what Kari said. Okay, no, please. Yes.
Okay, I was curious about your phrase, new language is created, and you just before told about pre-language. So what do you mean?
Well, I mean that the most important issue really is our bodily sensation, our bodily experience, even not experiences, but our bodily sensations, because when they come to experiences, they are language related. But I think that I still think in the way that having possibility to connect my bodily sensation to some form of describing it is helpful. In this way we create language, but perhaps in the way that we create language even if we do not have words. And this has become very important to me to think about the idea for Finnish men, for instance. We do not have so much language to connect my thoughts into my emotional experiences, but Finnish men are very emotional. You know perhaps that when we are in we ourselves, and when we are in the meetings, you sense the emotions immediately there. And sharing these emotions is very powerful and healing experience. That's a bit surprising. If nothing as such a big conclusion seems to come out of this, but being there, you start to think and work differently. Of course, knowing nowadays a bit about this idea of neuroscience and importance of oxytocin and all those kind of issues, I think that what could happen is that our bodies start to introduce something that were not there when we are in this kind of meetings, even if we cannot formulate in explicit words. We are in two meetings. We are the meetings in words, but primarily we are meeting in this where we are sharing our emotional experiences. Perhaps I will skip this. So there is a lot of description. What is this open dialogue meetings all about? They are open in a way that we do not prepare them. We work as team. It's an integration of the treatment and the therapeutic point. I think that this is the very exceptional idea the system of care is organized in a therapeutic way. And of course, it's a very powerful. There are so many people, so many different views, and if they come now. And it's not the case that first you need to plan the treatment and then you need to fulfill it, but make an integration of it. And what is most important is to open the meetings with open-ended questions that people start to can speak about the things that are most important for them at the moment when we start to speak, and then take care of our issues in the end of the meeting. I many times start to try to say to the people that do never open the meeting with your agenda. Always asking, how would you like to use the time? How are you? And then when we always have our issues, take the last minutes for that. Having all the voices heard, having the voices of the clinicians heard are very important, so that we have time in which we can discuss with each other, both about the issues of treatment and, of course, both also the issues, reflections in which we speak more about ourselves. And these are the ideas of the open dialogue, in which we came into the conclusion with Professor Jukka Aaltonen, in which we analyzed this new system of care that no longer orientated to put people into the hospital, but there were organized mobile crisis intervention teams as soon as possible. And analyzing this, comparing to the traditional care, we came up into these ideas that we started to call as principles of open dialogue. It seems to be optimal that we introduce services immediately in one day after the meeting, which means that we meet with people in the emotional turmoil. And when we are emotional turmoil, we have more access to this bodily sensing without explicit description. This is all about this and that. We always include the social network, the family, but many times there are other parts of the social network that are very important, the private social network, but also the social network of the community. For instance, young people coming in crisis, please invite the employment authorities to be and help you to find a way how to start occupational rehabilitation and so on and so on. Being flexible in the way to adapt to the unique needs of every client using the methods of care that you have. In open dialogue, it never has compensated any other method, but the idea is that we really can integrate whatever we can. We have in our staff, in resources, very different kind of skills that we can use in a flexible way. Mobility, going homes, going whatever places. Most strange place in which I have had a therapy meeting is a graveyard. It was a very powerful meeting. It was not a funeral, but one young man, 38 years of age, woke up of his psychotic dreams after 18 years. And she started to ask mother, what has happened with my cousin? What has happened with my aunt? What has happened with the neighbor? And found out that they have that. And then he said that when we come next time, I want that we go to the graveyard. And then we went to one grave to another and had a meeting with those who had passed away in his psychotic dream or nightmare, perhaps. Responsibility and psychological continuity, meaning that the system of care takes the responsibility, is available and also goes across the boundaries of the services. Outpatient, inpatient, but also between social care and mental health care, between drug addiction and everything else. Integrating the teams, or if not possible, at least to have meetings in which these different parts can work together. When I was working in the hospital, perhaps one professional group that surprised me positively were policemen. They were so good, for instance, especially taking care of young people in their crisis. And then in the end, with all this, introduce more safety to tolerate the uncertainty that there are no ready-made responses. but we need to live to the responses, and that's why we focus on dialogues and not for solving the problems. I had one thought that disappeared of that. Well, only to say of the dialogue is that learn to be in the meetings without the idea of really trying to have a control of having a change. The fourth point in the list, why this dialogical practice is effective, I think that it really has succeeded in at least in one way to across this dualistic point of view of human life. And now we also have had a possibility to look at what happens in our bodies when we are in dialogue. We had a research project that we called Relational Mind, in which we understood that the human mind really is relational and embodied. Reality is contextual, arising in each situation. But understanding this integrated, embodied view of psychotherapy makes it possible to apply the kind of psychotherapeutic help in much broader sense than we used to think. Actually, I think in any cases, because it's no longer necessary that you need to have some specific language skill or insight to be able to take use of psychotherapy, but really coming to the idea that we come together and then we share of experiences. We always share experiences. That's something we cannot avoid. It's not a question. Please share your experiences because it happens with all of us. And depending on how do we respond, this shared experience can become a kind of a healing experience or not. We know something about this. This is a new way, and of course I know that there is much more to learn. There are some studies that shows that in a psychotherapy setting, people do not respond so much on what the therapist is saying, but much more how he or she is saying this. The prosody, the pitch, the rhythm, and the timbre of the voice, body gestures, facial expressions. My interest in this, for instance, in this research project has been, in addition to think how do people respond, how do we synchronize? How do the therapist and the client synchronize to each other? When we speak about human mind, the human mind is not on the side of the clients, but we are always involved because it's relational. So the human mind is created in our context here and now in a way that we do it. Ramsayer and Zacher, this is a very classic research in which they found out that therapists and clients synchronize their body movements. And if they do that, they announce the alliance being better and the outcome of therapy being better. This happened in individual psychotherapy. And one therapist working in Innsbruck in Austria, Eva Benninger-Huber, had a huge amount of research about the importance of smiling. And of course, smiling is the most important way of our bodily communication. And smiling is also one of the most important way of affect regulation. I suppose you all have experience of people when someone is speaking that my son is dying, and then she gives a smile. It's not inadequate. It's her body attempt to regain the homeostasis in this huge pain that is happening. And how do we respond? It's a very important issue and question to think about. Some of the outcomes in which we've had, first of all, saying about this, you cannot read this, but this is only an attempt to try to find out what all elements are in the synchronization. Of course, we synchronize to each other in the speak. How do we speak? What do we speak? But more important, how do we speak? What is the prosodial part of the speech? In our autonomic nervous system, that everyone is saying that this is the most important way to connect with the outside world. Our body movements, how do we move? In our facial expressions, and how do we take use of the experiences that we have moment by moment. Some notions that we have had in the research is that we really found out that there is a concordance in the autonomic nervous system reaction between therapists, between clients. So our bodies are speaking besides the spoken language. It's not. It seldom happens that everyone is synchronized in their bodies. 2 or 3 maybe, and 1 or 2 in a way looking from outside. Most stressful episodes happen during the speech of others. For instance, when there are reflective comments, they seem to be most stressful moments for the clients, which is very important to realize that you need to be very respectful, sensitive, to not to arouse this too stressful situation for people to listen. But it's a very good experience to learn new things. We have learned that silent moments help people to access to most difficult issues which do not have words. So having breaks in between words, but also moments in between the turns help people to come. And the change do not seem to happen at the time that we are aroused, but many times after that. Which is also important because it has in a way confirmed for me that please do not make questions when people are in the emotional situation. Share the emotions and do not disturb this with your questions. Then afterwards you can ask, I wonder, how do you think about this, what happened? How do you explain this? And so on and so on. Make connection to the more explicit language after the idea. The last things, very shortly, but of course very important issue is this the point 5 that in almost all the humanistic practices, almost all psychotherapy schools that work with really work with psychotic problems, they share the same idea. Psychosis is not a pathology. Psychosis is not an illness. It's a kind of strategy, a survival strategy that our body is introducing to take care of the huge stress in which we are living. And if we can adopt this idea and think that there is nothing that we need to get rid of, but there is a lot that we need to start to understand, it changes our position, and people start to have the feeling, okay, this person has interest on me and is listening to me and respecting my experiences. Psychosis does not exist. There is no categorical difference between people who have psychotic experiences compared to the ones who have not yet have psychotic experience, because we all can have if we only are living in a stressful situation enough. When we meet with people who have had long time psychotic problems, it's not a question that they would have been a kind of deep psychopathology, but it's a sign of failure in treatment. And this failure comes out of 2 sources. Our system of care is organized in a way that they do not have enough early help, but have a very long time to be in their world before coming into the help, and have a long time to create survival strategies that are not so constructive. Most dangerous survival strategy is the isolation, and that's what we need to stop. Please do everything to stop the isolation, make connection to the friends, to the families, and so on. The other part of the failure in care is if we have a wrong understanding about all of this, what this is all about. If we think in a psychopathological way, we diminish the resources that people have for empowering in their own life. Two last points are that they focus on research, and we have also created ways. Actually, we can think that what happens is that we increase the reflectivity. People have more access to start to reflect of the different issues in their life connected with the emotional experiences, and we also have tools to look at the dialogue which leads to the increase of reflectivity. It's not an idea to make a categorization of the dialogue, because the good news is that there are so many good ways to be in dialogue. But there are also ways that are not so good. And of course, this is the most important to us to learn in our trainings. How could we do it better in some critical points, for instance, in the dialogue? And then the very last point is that open dialogue is totally developed in an integration with research. Actually, I do not know any other system, psychiatric system, that has been studied so profoundly as open dialogue. But it's very important to understand the role of research that is very different compared to the basic evidence-based medicine idea, in which it's thought that you need to have a laboratory kind of experiments and have a control of all variables that affect the treatment, and then make a comparison between the groups. Here we organize in a naturalistic way in the real world setting, that the research come into the practice and not the opposite. First is the practice, and when we start to make tools to understand more, find out the failures, find out the problems, and make it better, and of course we can also report it in a way that it's accessible for people around. But all the time think that the role of research is help to develop the practice, and not the opposite, that we need to have research to convince the others to how to do. Yesterday I heard so lovely example of the studies that you have been doing in Vermont. Exactly. Start to follow what happened in the real practice, and you learn most about this. And all the system becomes a part of the idea. And of course, the very end, the final slide, and perhaps also one of the answer to the question why dialogue is so healing experience, is that it's a move, it's a shift from thinking of methods and techniques and intervention to the basic values of human life. And of course, there is no more basic value than love is. And David Patterson says it in a so lovely way. Love is the life force, the soul, the idea. There is no dialogical relation without love, just as there is no love in isolation. Love is dialogic. And reading this, I have in my mind, for instance, some mothers who in the follow-up interview say that this was a painful process. But what happened, I learned to love my son again, with whom I had a broken relationship before 8 years. But perhaps it's also a kind of guide for us. Of course, it's not a question of love in a way that we are in a romantic relationship, but have a non-conditional respect of the other, even if she would be suffering, or the family would be suffering, and trying to understand instead of trying to change. So these were the ideas, and as you realize, it's not so a question that there are many different kind of ideas. And I suppose that if you have access of thinking a bit more comprehensively, very good things start to happen. In addition to your own practice, also in the system in which you are working.